Do you desire to turn your passion into income? Connect with other creative souls who also dance to the beat of their own drum? I'm Marie-Nicole, and I'm devoted to combining beauty, uniqueness, and connection in everyday living experiences. As a creative professional and Dharma coach, I help people connect to the truth of who they are and facilitate them in embodying their uniqueness. It is my hope in this podcast that I inspire you to live your life on your terms and earn your income through being uniquely you. After all, it's the unique thread that we each contribute to the collective tapestry that creates the whole. In the lead up to this week's super full moon, life has been presenting me with numerous opportunities to clearly see what it is that is holding me back from stepping into that next highest expression of self in business and life in general. There have been lots of little nudges and then some very big slaps across the face moments. And while I won't go into all the details of what those experiences have been exactly, I do want to share with you a practice that has evolved out of an accumulation of all these experiences, which has been very supportive, soothing, and healing as a part of this transmutation process I find myself currently journeying through. Now, in my La Luna Living workshop, I suggest a full moon release practice, a little ceremonial practice where you write out all the limiting beliefs that are holding you back, and once you've written them out, you then burn them. As you watch the smoke drift away, you feel into those limiting beliefs drifting off with it. This is a very small, simple practice that can be performed at any time. But it's very powerful to do this around the full moon, as the energy of each of the phases of the moon cycle affects us on an emotional level in a different way. And once you start working with the phases of the moon's cycle, you will start to recognize recurring patterns of things that surface, especially in the lead up to the full moon, inviting you to really look at these areas that you may have previously overlooked or suppressed. And when they surface, it's an opportunity to really address them and release those that are no longer serving you anymore. Now, what I'm going to share with you here in this episode is quite vulnerable, and some may think that it's best left unsaid, that keeping these experiences to ourselves is more beneficial in the healing process. But since I am working very closely with guidance from my intuition and inner knowing, taking instruction from my higher self-awareness, you could say, I am feeling called to share my journey and process, not for it to be witnessed by others, but for it to offer support to others also on this journey. So if you too are going through your own transmutation journey and feel like what's happening inside of you sets you apart from others, I want you to know that you are not alone. And while our journeys are unique and we feel like we are the only ones going through these experiences, even the fact that it may be difficult to find a place to express ourselves freely out of fear of being judged because of the differing perspective of others. You may have heard me say before that I don't believe in right or wrong, just different, and that just because we have different perspective, that doesn't mean that someone else's perspective is incorrect. So treasure that safe space you have to express yourself freely and the feelings that you are going through. And if you don't have that, then know that I am here with you and for you. My intuition is telling me that there is at least someone that listens to this podcast who needs to hear this. You may be someone across the other side of the world that I may never get a chance to meet in person. So me sharing my experience here is in service to you and anyone else feeling alone on this journey at the moment. My guess is that, as someone listening to this podcast who connects with the concept of doing business to your own beat, your way of living may not be conventional either. And if you've listened to previous podcast episodes, you'll be aware that my connection to the ways of wild nature plays a big part in how I choose to operate, as much as possible. Hence the focus on cyclical living and working with the cycles of the moon. So on that note, there are two offerings that I would like to highlight. If you would like to work with me in person, both physically and virtually, and dive in a little deeper into such practices. The first one is a physical in-person offering. Would you like to host a lunar crafting session in your space for a small gathering of 6 to 10 people where together over a 2-hour lunar crafting session we connect with our inner knowing, reflect on what we wish to call in during the new moon cycle, or recognize what limiting beliefs we are desiring to release under the illumination of the full moon? Then creating with intention a feather talisman, an object ascribed with magical powers intended to protect or heal that person it is made for. While crafting, we tune into what we wish to embody, what we wish to let go of. The feather talisman will then serve to remind us of the limiting belief or behaviour that we are releasing when it catches the wind. It also serves to remind us of the opposite, what we would like to step into, express and expand on or secure in our life. These sessions are best scheduled around either the new moon or the full moon, but it's not mandatory. The reason for this is that it is great to connect to these powerful stages of the moon cycle and to set the intention around the new moon or the full moon. The second way we can work together at the moment is a new offering that I have been working on behind the scenes, which I hope to launch very soon. It is a virtual gathering space. With so many listeners and viewers tuning in from across the globe, I've been wanting to open up space in my schedule for us to connect and gather, working with the energy of the moon cycle together, and kick off the week with tools and practices that we can use to support us throughout the week ahead, in thriving and stepping into our highest expression of self. Whatever that looks like for you in your personal journey right now, I'd like to be there to support you through that. So if you're interested in this offering, I will be announcing it in my newsletter, which at the moment comes out monthly. You can subscribe to this via the link in the show notes, as well as find out more about the Lunar Crafting Sessions offerings. There'll be a link for that in the show notes too. So back to my full moon release story. So the little practice I shared earlier, writing down and burning limiting beliefs, is something I've been doing for years now. But in the lead up to this full moon, there has been a culmination of many things that called forth a much bigger release ceremony. Now this may have just as much to do with the eclipse portal we are in, or even the karmic cycle that I am personally going through and closing the loop on. But either way, the experiences have been profound and transformative. A couple of weeks ago, I received some news which was delivered with the phrase, "I recognise this might be difficult news, but I wanted to be transparent about it as it will potentially affect you." While this news might sound like it was confronting for me, in truth it wasn't. I have healed from experiences of the past that led me into this situation that I find myself in today, making many decisions around business and life that are not just based on my personal needs, but the needs of my children, and especially the son who still lives with me here and is very much dependent on me. The fact that this news I received was not confronting in that way that people might think it would be, made me sit with the reason why or why not. And why I am still operating from a place of feeling constricted in my ability to move forward. What I recognised was that I was holding space for things that were really not serving my highest good, more out of respect for others involved, in particular my children, and a good example of this is the fact that I let go of my commercial space in order to stay in our family home and offer a sense of stability for my youngest son. Adjusting and adapting my business offerings to be able to be more flexible in my movements and support him in this transition. Choosing to stay in the family home was not based on me desiring to hold on to the past, but staying here has meant we are surrounded by all that keeps us tied to the past version of our existence. While it would have been easier for me to let the house go and move to a new place, it was not what he desired. And his life had been turned upside down in so many other ways that I chose to continue to support him until he was able to support himself and revisit my individual needs once he was in a position to make his own choices, which, according to the plan, was meant to be the end of next year once he had completed high school, and then he decided this year to leave school mid-year 11. Now we're looking down the barrel of being propelled into making changes much sooner. So I have spent pretty much the last 2 months trying to wrap my head around what this change in particular would look like. And then at the same time, life presented me with other changes, one after another, in all areas of my life, including work that I've been doing to support our basic needs, which has meant I have really not been able to avoid addressing any of the underlying shadow patterns that have surfaced. No option to suppress or overlook. It's been one confronting experience after another. And that message 2 weeks ago was the final piece of news that felt like the straw that broke the camel's back. I was feeling myself spinning out of control, being stretched from pillar to post, trying to support everybody else's needs, wants, desires, setting aside my own. And then it got to Saturday morning last weekend and I felt completely and utterly depleted. After driving my son into town for an 8:30 a.m. start at work, still in my pyjamas, I just put a big cardigan over the top of them, placed a cap over my untidy bed hair. Even though I'd been up since 5:30, I had prepared our usual sit-down breakfast for us, I just did not have the energy to get dressed and opted to do a PJ's run instead. When I got home, I crawled back into bed and I just cried. I could not believe that at almost 50 years of age, after all the devotion to my family, fellow creatives, community, that my existence had come to this. And that the fact that I had been doing so much inner work for years, trying to address all of my shadow patterns, ancestral wounds, and so forth, and yet still I landed here, feeling like a complete and utter failure in this thing called life. I pulled out my journal and I wrote these words. What the fuck is all of this about? I am so beyond over all of this. I'm really struggling to see the point of my existence and the so-called higher purpose. I don't even know what to do in the now, let alone next. I feel so constricted, and after all the self-awareness work and serving others, I find myself in a position of feeling so alone and depleted. At that point, I decided I would simply stay in bed and let the tears flow until I reached a point of dehydration or until it was time to head back into town and pick him up again from work, whichever came first. It did not take long at all for the tears to stop flowing though, and what followed was a whisper, burn things. Then again, burn things. Burn that which is no longer serving you. At that point, I decided I needed to revisit what was essential, not for anyone else, but for me. Now, some might be thinking that I shouldn't be sharing this until I have completely worked through the process and overcome the obstacles holding me back from moving forward. That did enter my mind, believe me, but the reason I am sharing this now is that I am choosing to follow the guidance of my intuition, inner knowing, messages from my higher self, and those messages have been that I need to share this. Others need to hear it for their benefit. I have been doing so much work on myself over the many years. This is not the beginning of a new journey or a way of operating. The experience over the weekend, I believe, was actually the end of a cycle. After realizing I had no more tears to shed, I looked at the time and it wasn't even 10 o'clock yet. So I got out of bed, put on my overalls, work boots and a straw hat, and I went out into the backyard and started a fire in the drum, which I had because I needed to burn things like dried thistle we'd pulled out of the ground and stored in tubs to try and minimise thistle taking over the property. choosing not to spray poison across the land and kill it along with everything else, but that's a whole other story. The other reason for the drum was to burn off old files that I had been carting around relating to my photography business. Almost 10 years worth of client files with contracts, etc., which legally I needed to hold on to for a set amount of years. But that time had well passed, and I had been planning to burn them, as I did not want to place that kind of information into the recycling bin or even landfill. So this morning my son and I were joking about my method of permanently archiving files into the cloud. So on top of burning old files and thistle, I started gathering items that kept me emotionally attached to aspects of my former self that were no longer necessary to hold on to and would not be of any use to anyone else, so I couldn't even donate them. So I made a cup of cacao, had a Liquid Bloom playlist playing in the background, and spent most of the day playing with fire and watching aspects of my past life that no longer served me drift off with the cloud of smoke. I cannot express how cathartic this was. It was so much so that I repeated the process on Sunday. And while I planned to spend the weekend working on new business offerings, following the guidance of my higher self, it felt so much more powerful to spend it releasing the old and making way for the new. While doing this, wild nature celebrated the endings with me. I had several dragonflies shimmer and dance around me and was visited by kookaburras, crows, little wrens, and even a peregrine falcon hovered overhead at one point. Now, in my gene keys, a peregrine falcon is actually the bird associated with my life's work. So for me, that was really special. While it's easy to say that life only presents you with that which you are able to handle, that doesn't mean that at the time of experiences you feel capable of handling that which you're presented with. There have been numerous times over the last couple of months that I have thought I am not ready for the change that I could feel coming. But I know that was me speaking out of fear, which is why my higher self kept whispering to me, "You don't know it yet, but you are more than ready." Then realizing that what has been holding me back is my fear of truly stepping into what I've been preparing to express in this lifetime. And that's okay. I've needed all the experiences that I've had to really become that highest expression of self that I've been preparing to become. And while I'm not exactly there yet, I recognize that becoming is a moving target. Our evolution of self is a constantly moving target. We never really reach that end goal. The goalpost is always ahead of us. As we grow and expand, shift and change, so does that goal. That burning ceremony I did over the weekend will now become a ritual. One which I will practice whenever I have time to devote it to in my schedule, as there is still a lot more I could burn. And a part of this process of preparing for what's next is allowing myself to be ready to leap when opportunities present that align with my highest expression of self in that moment. So paring things back to the absolute essential for me is my new short-term target, while still holding space for what my youngest son needs in this final stage of his journey towards independence. But once he is ready to leave the nest, I want to be ready to leave behind the nest that served us up until now, knowing it was never meant to be my forever home. New nests are waiting to be built in locations that have other experiences to offer the continual expansion and growth of this wild, wise woman who has potent medicine so deep in her bones, she's ready to share it with others as they head down their own path of the unknown too. So my invitation to you this full moon and eclipse portal, or even whenever you're listening to this episode, is to take notice of the little messages life is delivering to you through experiences that may be confronting or unpleasant, but explored further, could lead to revelations and leaps in your journey of evolution in this lifetime. Also, be sure to reach out if you'd like to host an in-person lunar crafting session. Or if you're nowhere near my neck of the woods but are interested in finding out about the virtual gatherings that I'm planning to host, sign up for the newsletter, which I plan to send out soon. I am a bit behind schedule, admittedly, with all the shifts and changes that have been taking place. I did lose my rhythm in that area. But hey, I'm human too, and you will have discovered from today's share that I too have experiences of peaks and valleys. But I do my best to show up and serve others, while also remembering I also need to support myself. If you find yourself serving others over supporting yourself more than you feel is healthy, then these gatherings would be perfect for you to attend, as it is exactly the type of thing I'll be focusing on. One last share. As a self-employed single mum, guardian of fur babies and steward of a small acreage, one thing I have to express that I'm quite proud of is that I rarely, if ever, get sick. And I attribute that to practices and habits that I have developed that are supportive of my health and well-being, which is why I'm so passionate about supporting others in this too. Connecting mind and body intelligence has a big part to play in me maintaining health and well-being. And yes, I have had occasions, like on the weekend, where I recognise an area that I have neglected that needs attention. But that is the journey of life. Tuning into what serves and supports us as well as others. So until next week, strike a match. Burn that which is no longer serving you in a safe, non-destructive way, of course, and celebrate the liberation that will follow as you release the old and open up space for the new. Happy full moon, beautiful souls. Thank you so much for your time. I know how valuable it is, and I hope you got value out of listening to this podcast. If you are looking for a coach to support and guide you through your own unique journey of creating a life you love, then reach out for a connection call. And if you'd like to connect with other creative souls in person by joining us at a workshop, a retreat, or to book a unique shopping experience here at Creators Nest, I run those by appointment. So check out the website for more details. The link is in the show notes. Oh, and please leave a review. I'd love to hear any insights or inspirations that were activated in you from this podcast. And I look forward to drumming, dancing, or soaring alongside of you.